After they arrested Jesus, they led him away and brought him to the high priest's house. Peter followed from a distance. When they lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant woman saw him sitting in the firelight. She stared at him and said, "This man was with him too." But Peter denied it, saying, "Woman, I don't know him." A little while later, someone else saw him and said, "You are one of them too." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." An hour or so later, someone else insisted, "This man must have been with him because he is a Galilean too." Peter responded, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." At that very moment, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter, and Peter remembered the Lord's words, "Before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And Peter went outside and wept bitterly. I'm always amazed when I talk to someone about a significant day in their life, a memorable, really memorable day, either for good reasons or bad reasons. Maybe it's the birth of their child or the day they met their spouse, or maybe it's something really hard, really bad, a car accident that they learned a family member was in, a diagnosis, a hard diagnosis. What I'm always struck by is how people, of course, remember that date. They remember the exact day because it's significant, and they remember so many details of that day, even though it was maybe a whirlwind and a blur. But little details strike them and stand out to them. Details like what the tiles looked like, or what color the walls were. They remember that date, and whenever they tell me, okay, this date in 2011 or whatever happened to me, I think back and I think I can kind of remember what season of life I was in at that moment. I can maybe remember where I was living, but I don't remember the specifics of that day. It was just another day to me. The first Good Friday was just another day to everyone in the world except those in Jerusalem, and even most people in Jerusalem probably had no idea what was going on. We read the story of Peter, and I could sermonize about all kinds of things. Why did he deny Jesus? Was it fear? Was it shame? And what are the ways we deny Jesus in our own lives? But what I'm really interested in is the particularity, that this is one particular story. These are Peter's memories of that first Good Friday, a day that would be world-changing, but nobody knew it at the time, not even Peter. Nobody knew how this was going to change everything. So we've created these videos for you guys to hopefully enter into the day. There are going to be different times attached to different moments throughout the day, and you can either sit down and watch these videos in one sitting, or you can really try to track that first Good Friday and the different times of day and watch the videos during those times. During this time Jesus was on the cross, during this time he was before trial. So we start early in the morning when it was dark out. We don't know exactly what time, but sometime late at night, Jesus was praying in the garden. He kept asking his disciples to pray with him and pray for him, but they kept falling asleep because it was late and they were tired and they were weary. And then in that garden, the high priests and the Jewish officials came and they arrested Jesus. Peter takes his sword. Apparently Peter kept a sword with him. He takes his sword, cuts off the ear of one of the people arresting Jesus, and Jesus tells him to put the sword away, and he heals that servant's ear. Dorothy Sayers actually imagines that very servant sitting around the fire later with Peter. And of course it's all dark and they can't quite see, but Peter's sort of hiding away as that servant's talking about the encounter he had earlier. So Peter's part, this is his part of the story, but he's just one part in this larger drama that's unfolding. While he's being interrogated by maids and servants, Jesus is being interrogated by the Jewish high officials. And if we think about that for a second, every one of Jesus' friends and family, they were Jews. They looked up to these officials as the top dogs in their religion, in their whole country. Most of the people Jesus knew looked up to them, and here they are interrogating him, calling him a heretic. Excommunication would have been bad enough, but as we know, they want more than that. And they eventually decide he's guilty of the highest heresy, of claiming to be God, and yet they don't have the power to kill him, so they take him to the Roman official, Pontius Pilate. Now, Pilate doesn't care. He certainly doesn't care if Jesus is claiming to be God, so they say, well, he's a rabble-rouser. He's stirring up riots, and they put these crimes on him. Pilate questions him, seems to see that he's innocent, and we don't know what Pilate's motivation is, if he's genuinely convinced that there's something different about this Jesus of Nazareth, or if he just doesn't care, or if he does believe he is innocent and doesn't want to be part of that. But Pilate tries to kind of shirk this, and he sends them off to Herod. He knows Herod doesn't have the authority. Only Pilate has the authority to put someone to death. But he sends them off to Herod. Maybe Herod will kind of get to the bottom of this and get these Jewish religious fanatics out of my way. Well, Herod questions him for a while, and Herod eventually ends up siding with the Jewish officials. He ends up mocking Jesus, having him mocked, and they end up back at Pilate's. I think Pilate is realizing now that there's really no way that he's going to get out of this, and again, he's just a politician trying to do what's best for him, really. And there's all kinds of people in town for this Jewish festival called Passover. And so he's just trying to think of how to not have a huge, already very crowded city turn into riots. How do we sort of pacify the crowd? And then he gets this idea, because he's still kind of troubled that this Jesus of Nazareth seems innocent. And so he suggests, well, what if we release a prisoner to you, and I'll give you an option. We have Barabbas, who's a convicted criminal, a convicted rabble-rouser, and we have Jesus of Nazareth, what's the big deal? And we know what the crowd shouts. The last appeal is to the people who Jesus healed, who Jesus sat with, ate with, wept with. It's these people that Pilate appeals to. And what do they say? They say, give us Barabbas. And what should I do with Jesus of Nazareth? Crucify him, the people cried.